We are joined by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Appreciate him taking the time to join us here in the middle of the Senate confirmation process. And let's go ahead and start here, Senator, right off the top. Based on everything you're seeing, do you expect everyone that Trump has put forward to be confirmed? Is there any nervousness you have about any of these nominees based on what you're hearing on Capitol Hill at this point?
The hearing we did today with Governor Kristi Noem, I thought the Democrats were fairly reasonable in their questioning. I think she's going to get bipartisan support. That's one, that has been my committee. Russ Vogt, we did a couple of days ago, and that's for OMB, Office of Management and Budget. He got more partisan response from the Democrats. I think he'll pass, but with Republican votes only, unless he gets one or two on the floor. So most of them are going to go that way. A few of them the Democrats will vote for. Some of them will pass with Republicans only. And then there's a couple of questions on ones that who I think are real reformers, whether or not some of the neocons in the Republican Party will vote against them. These would be people like Tulsi Gabbard, people like Kash Patel. You've got some people who are institutionalists up here who believe that the institution of big government is more important than principles, and they don't want us to be a disruptor in any of those spots. But I'm thoroughly convinced people like Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard are necessary because politics has polluted our intelligence agencies and politics has polluted our domestic agencies like the FBI. It's got to be gotten rid of.
Senator Paul, where do you find, where do you expect that RFK Jr. is going to fall on this spectrum in terms of opposition, bipartisan support, just based on what you already know of him? I know we still have to hear from him on Capitol Hill, but there are some who seem to think that, or are suggesting at least, that he may be a tougher pass for some members of the Senate.
I'm an enthusiastic supporter of his. I'm also an enthusiastic believer that vaccines were one of the biggest medical miracles ever in all of modern medicine, really beginning with the inoculation for smallpox back in the 1700s, culminating really with polio vaccine and moving forward. That said, I'm for voluntarism. I'm for parents making a choice. And if something's good for you, sell me on it. I'll give you an example. The smallpox vaccine, the initial one, was an inoculation with the smallpox. They took it from somebody who had a few pox and not much of a disease. They unroofed a scab, took pus, and stuck it in somebody else's arm. But in those days, the death rate from smallpox was 1 in 3. The death rate from the vaccine was not insignificant. It was 1 in 50, and yet people took it by the thousands without a mandate. Death rate 1 in 50 for the inoculation. Death rate 1 in 3 for smallpox. So people are not stupid. This is where the elitists get it wrong. They think we're all too stupid to make a rational decision because parents won't give their kid a COVID vaccine. Well, parents have seen that COVID is a non-deadly disease for kids, and there is a small but measurable risk of a heart inflammation with it. I think RFK is going to be honest about vaccines. I think he's going to present honest studies and let people make judgments. And really, you can have less vaccine hesitancy if we have more testing, actually, and we show most of the vaccines are probably pretty benign. But the thing is show us the testing. Let's go head-to-head and tell us the truth. I still think probably a COVID vaccine, if you're over 75 or if you're morbidly obese, you might want to take it, even though COVID's not as dangerous as it was in 2020. But for kids, I don't think there's any value in taking it because they're not honest with us. Everybody's like, oh, damn, I'm not believing anything the government tells me anymore because they're dishonest about childhood vaccines for COVID. So I think RFK is going to bring a healthy dose of honesty. I think he's got a good chance of passing, but it could be close.
We're talking to Senator Rand Paul about the confirmation process and more. I want to ask you a hypothetical, and then I want to ask you, in your world, what you think should happen. TikTok is set to officially, theoretically, not be allowed to be shared on the App Store on January 19th. That is Sunday, the day before the inauguration. Yet, based on everything we've heard from the Biden team, they say they're not going to enforce it. They're going to pass the buck to Trump. TikTok CEO is scheduled to be at the inauguration. Couple of part question here for you. Can you remember a bill that Congress passed and the president signed that both parties now seem like they're kind of saying, actually, we don't really want this bill to go into effect? It seems more like a threat than it was an actual implementation of a legislative and executive authority action. And second, in your mind, what should happen? If you were given charge to try to get a solution here, what should happen with TikTok?
So it's extraordinary for a bill to pass overwhelmingly. You know, I voted against it because I'm for free speech, but this bill's passed overwhelmingly to ban it, and now everybody's like, wow, I can't believe they're really going to do it. Maybe we shouldn't do it. And I think there is a possibility that under the law, he'll be able to grant at least a 90-day extension. Now, what would I do under it? I believe in free speech. If you don't like Clay and Buck, turn them off. If you really like them, record them and listen to them over and over again all day long. You know, it's freedom of choice. But let's say, well, it's complicated. They're owned by a foreign entity. Even that's not really true. About 60% of TikTok's ownership is international investors. Their CEO is from Singapore, not from China. The two inventors were Chinese, but 7,000 American employees own part of this. So to me, it's an illegal taking. You're taking somebody's business without ever trying them a court. They say, oh, you're sharing data with the Chinese Communist Party. Well, prove it. Prove it in court. You can't just take my property without proving something. That's an accusation. But an in-between would be this. There's something called CFIUS. It's a committee of something foreign investment. It's like when a adversary country owns something that's in our U.S., we look at it and see if we can get a board that distinguishes them and distances them from their country. So there are companies like this. I know of a company. I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to hurt them, but 1,500 Americans work for this company. It's a good company, not as big as TikTok by any means, but it's owned by 3 Chinese investors. They say some of them are, related to the Chinese Communist Party. Everybody in China has some relation to the Chinese Communist Party. But what they did is they set up an American board. There's only Americans on it, no Chinese citizens on it, and it's sort of a firewall. TikTok has offered to do this. TikTok has offered to put all their records on Oracle's cloud housed in Texas. And so there's all kinds of things that could be done in between of it. But I really think it's an affront to the First Amendment to tell 170 million Americans they can't use a means of expression on social media.
Senator Paul, I'm totally in agreement with you and have been the whole time. And I've been looking around wondering, is everyone else in the Republican Party taking crazy pills? To me, they're taking property without proving that any of this spying has happened. They think that there could be spying going on, but yeah, there could be a lot of different things. Why are so many Republicans on board with this? Is this just a way to look tough on China without having to actually do anything about China?
Here's the most ridiculous argument. I heard this one 3 times today. Well, the Chinese ban our social media companies, so we should ban theirs. And it's like, well, that's because that's Chinese authoritarianism. That's what we object to. That's why we're America. We're not China. That's why we don't reject free speech. It's just insane. But it is an hysteria. There are hysterics running all around Congress, mostly Republican, but some Democrat too, and they want to end all trade. They're going to punish China by ending all trade. And here's what I have to tell you. Look, I don't like Chinese communism. I've written 2 books against Chinese communism, The Case Against Socialism, and Deception about the great COVID cover-up in China and here. So I have no love for the Chinese communists. But if you really like the idea of a free Taiwan, you like the idea of that continuing, it's very unlikely that there's going to be a war in which the U.S. goes to war with mainland China, beats them, and we keep Taiwan free. It's much more likely that if we have enough trade, both U.S.-China trade and U.S. and Taiwan trade and Taiwan-China trade, that China will see it not in their interest. And that sounds weak, but at the same time, if they don't do it in their interest, I don't think there's a military solution. And so we are better off telling the Chinese, we will continue to trade with you, but if you do take Taiwan by force, guess what? Trade's over. So the threat of ending trade is really about the best deterrence I think we can have to keep them out of Taiwan.
You ran for president, Senator Paul, against Donald Trump back in 2015. You worked with him from 2016 first term. How is Trump 2.0 as he prepares to take office here in 2025 different, if at all, from the guy that you met and ran against back in 2015? And how, in your mind, is Trump 2.0 going to compare to Trump 1.0 in terms of efficacy based on what you see?
I would say no distinct philosophical differences. I think since he's been a young man, he's been a protectionist and a big believer that tariffs are the way to go. Now, I don't see eye to eye on that. I see tariffs as a tax, and taxes are an impediment to trade and prosperity. But what I would say is he's been very consistent in that venue. He also often uses the leverage of tariffs to try to get something else. So as a geopolitical weapon, it was part of why we got Remain in Mexico, which I thought was very good and did work to keep people in Mexico and deter the mass millions from coming across the border. So I don't think he's necessarily changed on that. I think he's been good on taxes, good on people he appointed to the court, relatively good on regulation, I'd say, and not so great on spending. And I think he's probably about the same, and that's why you have to have some deficit hawks like me that will stand up to either Republican or Democrat and say, we can't keep spending like drunken sailors up here. But for the most part, he and I will get along fine. I oversaw Governor Kristi Noem's hearing today, one of his appointees. I'm all in for her, got her through the hearing. Same with Russ Vogt for OMB. Vast majority I'm going to vote. Many of these people are people I would have picked. Marty McCary at FDA, he's amazing. Jay Bhattacharya at NIH, amazing. RFK at HHS. Many of these people are people I could have easily picked if I were the one picking. So I'm very enthusiastic about a lot he does. I don't think he's necessarily changed a lot. The one thing I think is going to be different this time is he's not going to mess around. The first time around, he had to figure out, government, how to run it, how to get people in positions, and he had a lot of resistance from the party. Now he is the party. He's got the pick of the party for people to work for him. The institutional Republican forces are not as strong anymore. They also know that he is more popular than they are. So I think more can get done. But still, somebody has to watch the piggy bank and somebody has to watch the debt because there are still many Republicans up here. The only thing they want to do is reconciliation, is bust the military caps. And, which really spending is spending. We had to spend it some for the military, but we can't bankrupt ourselves on the military either.
How hopeful are you about Doge and these kind of outside advisory efforts to help rein in the spending, Senator Paul?
I'm enthusiastic about what they're talking about because it's what I've been talking about for a decade. Pointing it out is the easier part, though. But I'm all in for him. I know Vivek Ramaswamy well. I communicate with him regularly, and we have the same sort of ideas on this. I do think it's going to take Congress's action. There are two executive actions they could do, and they think they have the power to impoundment. The law was written against them. They're probably going to be rejected in court on impoundment, and I'm not positive the money actually goes back to the Treasury. I'm not sure where the money goes when you impound it. But I do know that the other tool is legal, and that's called rescission. So let's say Congress sends them $1 billion to build an aircraft carrier, and Elon Musk goes out there and he looks at every nut, screw, and bolt and saves $200 million, which is really probably possible in everything he looks at. Let's say he saves $200 million. He wants to send it back to Congress to put back in the Treasury. That's called rescission, and it's an expedited vote, meaning it has to come to a vote, can't be filibustered, and it's a simple majority. So we have a simple majority in the House and the Senate. If we had a simple majority with any kind of guts at all, we'd cut hundreds of billions of spending. But what you have to prepare yourself, and a lot of people realize this, we tried a $15 billion rescission package in the first Trump administration. They sent $15 billion back. And in today's trillion-dollar deficits, that's a pittance. And it's still lost. We got 48 Republicans, lost 2 Republicans, and we lost 50 to 48 on a rescission package. So we still have to do it. And I encourage them every time. Do hundreds of billions, but come up here and lobby the big government Republicans, make sure everybody in their state knows that they're voting to cripple the country through debt. And this is where Elon and Vivek having a big microphone or an amazingly large microphone could maybe convince some of these big government Republicans to do the right thing and vote for rescission or cutting spending.
Senator Paul, we'll see you and some of your staff and hopefully your wife, who I know has great taste in radio, hopefully around some of the inaugural events. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. See you.